Hi folks, this is a video that is a summary of the spiritual aspect of 9/11 as an occultic event. My previous video dealt with the actual evidence stuff, the stuff you saw in Ghostbusters, stuff in the Bible, links to Aleister Crowley, flight numbers, and that kind of stuff. This one is dealing with the issue of what do we make of this spiritually? Why is this important for the Christian worldview? Um, how do we fit this into our worldview? So I want to start out this by basically saying that whether you realize it or not, whether you acknowledge it or not, whether you live like it or not, you were born on a spiritual battlefield. And there's one side that loves you and the other side hates you. And both sides want you. And we're born into the middle of this. And we're part of this whether we want to be or not. Um, the story of history, the story of the Bible, is really best understood as a cosmic struggle between God and Satan. At least that is a part of it. That is a major theme of it. Of course, there are other themes like God doing everything for His glory, God's love for us, etc. But the cosmic struggle between God and Satan that has been going on for thousands of years is a very major theme in the Bible. Um, I think that 9/11 is really worth looking at from a spiritual perspective and standpoint because of this. I can't think of any other single move that Satan has made, assuming that 9/11 was an occultic event. Okay, I can't think of a single other thing in the last 2,000 years since Satan put Jesus on the cross that was a bigger move than 9/11. This was Satan's biggest move in 2,000 years. So I think it's worth looking at. Um, and, when we look at this, you know, I think it's amazing and wonderful that what we see is this was a failed ritual. You know, I mean, yeah, it's true that the world changed for the worst on that day, and very tragically, thousands of people died. And that raises a very serious, legitimate question. Why would a God who is sovereign permit that level of suffering? And that's a very honest question that I think I want to deal with in another video. I'm not trying to dodge that, but I don't want to deal with that here because that's not the subject of this video. But I think that there are good answers for that. And uh, I think that is an answerable question. And I want to deal with that in another video, but just not right here. But yeah, I think we can have serious joy and hope that this was actually a victory for God. We look at 9/11 as a defeat for us, but when you consider that the Satanist plan failed because the flight that had the number of Thelema, the satanic religion of Thelema, Aleister Crowley's religion, Flight 93, was supposed to hit Building 7, and symbolically, as I've shown in other videos, was supposed to be taking out God's temple. It was the Solomon Brothers building, Solomon's temple, masonry, with Jachin and Boaz, the twin towers, and so on. The Arch of Titus and all that stuff. It was an attempt, symbolically anyway, to basically kill God in God's house. You know, Solomon's temple, figuratively speaking. And you were supposed to see the flight with the number of Thelema destroy the building with the number of God. That was supposed to be the final act that you were supposed to see. And it didn't happen. And so that tells you who's in control, who's sovereign, so who's going to win this struggle? Is it going to be the God who can create everything and speak everything into existence? The God who can who can permit his enemies to kill him and then raise himself from the dead? Or is it going to be the God who is not really a God, kind of a wannabe God, who can't manage to fly 4 planes into 4 buildings and do it in a convincing way? Okay. When you look at it like this, you know, this is really encouraging to me. And that's why I wanted to make these videos because this gives me joy when I look at this like in this way. Um, I've had kind of a difficult year in some ways, and this is one of the things that kind of kept me going through this. Uh, is knowing and being able to see Satan's failure and God's sovereignty. And it's not only just this. I'm going to do another video on eventually on the failures of the New World Order. This is not their first failure. This is their biggest one, but it's not their first one. There are other ones. They've got a long string of them. These people are not omnipotent. They're not omniscient. Um, there's a lot of them just basically throwing crap at a wall and seeing what sticks. They have a whole bunch of different parallel tracks that they're working on at any given time, and because they don't know what's going to work out. They're just trying a lot of different stuff, and whatever works, whatever sticks, they work with it. What doesn't, they just disregard it and keep going and try something else. It's pretty much just they're making stuff up as they go along, you know. And to me, that's really encouraging because when you really look at this, you can see who's obviously going to win this, and that is really encouraging. Um, now, here I want to show you just some scriptural references uh, that I didn't cover very much before, but these entities that were attempted to that they were attempting to break out of the bottomless pit are the ones apparently from Genesis 6, the ones mentioned in Peter and Jude, and the idea was apparently that they were going to break them out in Revelation 9 fashion on September 11th, 2001, and it didn't happen. Um, that's really great. That's awesome. That's cool. And I also want to point out too here. Now, this idea of gates and keys that you see from Enochian magic, which I've mentioned, that is not unbiblical language. You see here in Revelation 9, 9:1 that this star falling from heaven was given the key to the shaft of the bottomless pit. So there's a key. I think that what you see in Revelation 9:1, that's the 49th key. I think that that's the 49th key. That's why Dee and Kelly were not given that key. That's it. And I'll talk more about that in a minute. But also the language of gates. That's not gates of hell. That's not an unbiblical concept. Um, Jesus talking to Peter was talking about the gates of hell shall not prevail against his church. Um, what is super interesting about this statement was uttered apparently, and then I'm getting this from Michael Heiser. This when Jesus said this, they were in Caesarea Philippi. Caesarea Philippi is at the base of Mount Hermon. Mount Hermon, according to the book of Enoch, is where the angels who sinned in Genesis 6 made a pact with each other and decided that they were going to go down and take wives from the daughters of men. And that decision, that pact that they made with one another was on Mount Hermon. And and this is the location where Jesus makes that reference about the gates of hell. Now, I don't think that's an accident. Um, there's a lot more about this stuff in the Bible than most people realize. But moving on along here, this is tied in, as I mentioned before, with the Temple of Solomon, the Temple of Herod, that was destroyed in 70 A.D. And symbolically, and go back and watch that video if you're not sure what I'm talking about. That was uh, symbolically the World Trade Center complex was Solomon's temple, and it was the temple of Yahweh. And the idea was they were going to take it out, and they were going to. The idea is to kill Yahweh, and it didn't happen. You know, the flight with the number of 93 failed to take out the building with the number of the biblical Yahweh, because biblically the number 7 is identified with Yahweh, with God, and 93 is clearly identified with Thelema, satanic Thelema. So I want to leave with this thought here. The Enochian angels, these angels that talk to Dee and Kelly, they talked a lot about these 48 keys. There are all these keys and calls to satanically, ritualistically open these 48 out of 49 gates. There's a 49th gate, and I don't think that this is entirely unbiblical. I mean, we can't trust too much what comes out of or trust at all what comes out of the mouth of a demon, but um, the Bible does use some similar language and in somewhat similar ways. So it's possible that some sort of a structure like this in the spiritual world could actually exist in some way. Um, so these 48 keys are really not any good unless you have the 49th one, I would assume. So who's got the 49th key? What is the 49th key and who has it? Uh, Here's what I think it is. You know, Jesus said in Revelation 1:18, I am he that liveth, and I was dead, and behold, I am alive forevermore, and I have the keys of hell and death. So the 49th key is with Jesus, and these jokers in the bottomless pit, they will, in God's own timing, in his timing, they will be released. When Jesus says it's time for him to get out, then somebody will take the key down from heaven to the bottomless pit and open it, and then Revelation 9 starts. But before that happens, they're not getting out, and there's nothing they can do to force it, because the one who's holding the 49th key, that's Jesus. And when Jesus went down in in 1 Peter 3:18, Christ also suffered once for sins, the righteous for the unrighteous, that he might bring us to God, being put to death in the flesh, but made alive in the spirit, in which he went and proclaimed to the spirits in prison, kind of like a victory lap in racing, because they formerly did not obey when God's patience waited in the days of Noah. Okay, he basically went down there and told them, essentially, look, let me remind you, you lose, and you're not getting out of here because I've got the keys that keep you in here. And so, to me, this is really cool to be able to actually see playing out in world events around me. Events that I've lived through and saw on my television, and events that have changed my life and changed the world, is to be able to see how this stuff indicates that the God of the Bible is real and that he's sovereign, and that this stuff that we are actually taught in Sunday school, this really does have meat and bones to it. It's not just mythological garbage. This is real world stuff, and it's relevant. And this is that the biblical worldview is a coherent way of looking at reality, and I find that really very comforting. And that's why I call this channel the Coherent Worldview, because this is it's things like this that really pull everything in life all together and kind of blend it all together and bring it together in a way that is coherent, and it just all fits together. And the only way that all this stuff can really fit together and that you can really have any, in my opinion, any hope of a decent prospect of life and the life hereafter is with a biblical worldview and everything that entails. So anyway, I hope that you have enjoyed this series of videos and that you've been encouraged by it, because I was definitely and spiritually encouraged in making it. And just one more thing too before we finish here. I have found that I have not yet found a single Christian who knows anything about Enochian magic. I found only one or two who know anything about Aleister Crowley, including ministers who've been to seminary and stuff. This stuff is not taught in Sunday school. It's not taught in churches, and I think that that's not good. And one of the intents of these videos is to raise Christian awareness of what Satan's plans and modus operandi are, so that the church can be well equipped to stand up and expose this stuff as we're commanded to in Ephesians 5. So anyway, I hope you've enjoyed these videos, and please, if you have, like it, subscribe, and tell your friends about it. Thank you very much for watching. Bye-bye.